A Republican revolution. McCain now leads Bush in South Carolina with one poll, and money starts flowing to McCain. The cockpit voice recorder captures the final horrifying moments of Alaska Air Flight 261. And more exclusive news from CBS, how top secret letters to the president were left vulnerable by a CIA security breach.
This is the CBS Evening News. With Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. A shake-up and shake-out today in the Republican presidential campaign. Is Bush's southern firewall against McCain burning in South Carolina or not? Here's the latest. If you believe the polls, John McCain has swept from behind and has suddenly chewed up George W. Bush's 20-point lead in South Carolina, leading into the February 19th primary there. After his stunning come-from-behind blowout of Bush in New Hampshire, McCain's momentum now also includes more money pouring in to keep fighting. Democrats Al Gore and Bill Bradley are already stumping California for the biggest delegate prize of all in the Super Tuesday mega primary March 7th. First about the Republicans and the first Southern battleground. Bill Whitaker is there.
Forget the bounce. New Hampshire was more like a launching pad for John McCain, wiping out a 20-point South Carolina deficit by one poll and drawing in almost $750,000 almost overnight.
We're very pleased at where we are, but we know it's going to be a tough 18 days.
McCain's stunning victory stripped the cloak of invincibility from George W. Bush. Not only is Bush shaken, but big money backers have the jitters too. Some already are hedging their bets and giving donations to McCain now as well. So Bush has dropped his front-runner assumptions and picked up the boxing gloves.
And I'm ready for the battle. I'm going to travel this state, reminding folks that you're looking at a man who's coming from outside of Washington, D.C.
It's a wake-up call. Is take this guy for real. Don't let him get away with his deception, and we are going to be aggressive.
Folks here revere God and country. Bush claims the religious right. In fact, one of his first stops here was to Bob Jones University, a Christian conservative bastion. Today, he lunged for McCain's base, veterans, who with their spouses make up a third of Republican voters here.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to be standing on a stage with Medal of Honor winners.
War hero McCain fired back. Standing before the aircraft carrier Yorktown in Charleston Harbor, he reminded vets of his common bond with them.
There is no more patriotic state in America than the state of South Carolina. There are more veterans per capita.
Bush seems to have a lock on the party establishment, but South Carolina is changing. Moderates and independents make up a growing force, the very voters who made McCain the winner in New Hampshire. Dan?
Bill Whitaker in South Carolina. Bush is also said to be reconsidering now his so far successful effort to keep McCain off most ballots in the New York primary. There are signs of voter backlash about it, and the Bush people fear they may have handed McCain an issue. A judge's decision on Bush's plan to keep McCain off the New York ballot is expected tomorrow. Gary Bauer isn't on the New York ballot, and he is quitting his campaign after no-shows for him in Iowa and New Hampshire. New York is one of 13 states holding Republican primaries or caucuses March 7th. Among the Democrats, there are 15 Super Tuesday states. New York and or California could be must-wins for Bill Bradley. He figures he has his best chance in New York. Bradley has the money to keep campaigning, but he needs to show he can win somewhere and win big. Here's what Bradley's up against. Al Gore currently has a 7-1 lead over Bradley in delegates to the convention. It takes 2,170 to win the nomination. California is the single biggest delegate prize, 367. That's why, even though the primary is still a month away, Gore and Bradley are there today and will be back early and often. Investigators looking for answers in Monday's crash of Alaska Airlines Flight 261 now have the second of the plane's 2 flight recorders. A salvage ship today brought the newly retrieved flight data recorder to shore. The cockpit voice recorder was retrieved earlier and played back. CBS's Bob Orr reports on new and horrifying evidence of what may have contributed to the flight's plunge into the Pacific Ocean. Bob?
Dan, investigators tonight suspect that the pilot's efforts to troubleshoot that problem on Alaska Airlines Flight 261 in the end may have actually contributed to the crash. There is evidence the pilots initially were able to handle the jammed horizontal stabilizer, but as they continued to work to fix that problem, it only got worse and the jet plunged out of control. The cockpit voice recorder recovered from the wreckage reveals the pilots of Alaska Airlines Flight 261 struggled for more than half an hour to save the crippled jetliner. At 31,000 feet, the pilots first reported they were having trouble controlling the aircraft. The MD-83's horizontal stabilizer began pivoting up, pushing the jet down. The plane quickly dropped about 7,000 feet before the pilots were able to stop the runaway stabilizer and level the aircraft. But as they prepared for an emergency landing in Los Angeles, the pilots, talking with mechanics on the ground, continued trying to fix the stabilizer. Sources say the pilots followed emergency procedures, turning on and off motors that control the stabilizer. But it apparently kept moving up, ultimately pitching the plane into an extreme nose-down position.
Then control was suddenly lost. The crew made references to being inverted that are consistent with the witness statements to that effect.
It's important to note at this point nobody is blaming the pilots for the crash. But investigators do want to know if the pilots could have landed immediately instead of trying to fix what they called the stabilizer jam. The flight data recorder on its way now to the NTSB lab in Washington may tell us if the pilots ever had a chance. Dan?
Bob Orr. There is no way to overestimate the grief and pain for relatives of air crash victims. A new federal law seeks to minimize some of the pain inflicted after past crashes through carelessness and neglect among the airlines as others. CBS's Sandra Hughes has a report about response time.
Guarded closely by Alaska Airlines officials, a convoy of family members was brought to the beach closest to the crash site to grieve. Unlike many past air disasters, families are praising the airline's compassion.
I was never without some kind of attention and assistance, and it was very important for me, and I really appreciated that.
That's a new sentiment. Families of victims in other air disasters complained of insensitivity, rudeness, and horrifying examples of incompetence.
There were families in Pan Am that ended up getting the wrong bodies, and they didn't know who to return the bodies to.
Vicki Kumak lost her husband in Pan Am Flight 103. She says the airline stonewalled her questions.
I had to watch the flames over and over again and wonder in what field in Scotland my husband was laying in.
There were similar nightmarish stories after ValueJet crashed, and victims' families denounced TWA after Flight 800 went down.
We don't know nothing more than we did when we came here the first day.
The collective anger moved Congress to pass a law in 1996 to protect air victims' families. And January 1st of this year, federal officials compelled the airlines to provide even more assistance. Alaska Airlines is the first major crash since then.
Among the provisions, airlines must pay for family members to travel to the site of the airline accident and reimburse rescue agencies for victim recovery and identification. The Red Cross must be called in to provide professional mental health counselors before they could use baggage handlers or ticket agents.
What I see us doing is getting better and smarter every time we do it.
But it's never any easier. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Oxnard, California.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, exclusive new details of the CIA security breach. It involved top secret letters to the president. And later, Eye on America, a hard news investigation into what some call supermarket payola. The U.S. Navy is detaining a Russian oil tanker in the Persian Gulf on suspicion that it was smuggling Iraqi oil. The tanker was seized leaving the Gulf by a U.S. ship enforcing United Nations sanctions against Saddam Hussein. The ship was diverted to a holding area. Under the sanctions, Iraq can only sell a limited amount of oil to buy food and medicine. Russia insists the oil on the ship came from Iran. The U.S. Justice Department said today it had no plans to investigate former CIA Director John Deutch, despite new accusations that he may have risked national secrets on the Internet. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin has learned more about what Deutch was doing on his home computer.
While he was director of the CIA, John Deutch used his home computer to write secret documents intended for the highest levels of government. CBS News has learned some were memos to the president, and some were what is known as top secret code word, meaning a special security clearance above top secret was needed to see them. All on a computer which was also used to visit what the CIA calls high-risk sites on the internet, including porn sites, and which received email from a Russian scientist.
Anytime that you have classified information on an unclassified computer system, that the chances of access to that are good.
The current CIA director, George Tenet, was answering questions again today about his handling of the case and why Deutsch has not been prosecuted for putting highly classified documents on his home computer, while physicist Wen-Ho Lee is facing life in prison for having downloaded nuclear secrets onto unclassified computer tapes.
In one instance, there's an intent to do harm to the United States. That's a legal judgment that's been made. In the other instance, a similar legal judgment was not made.
But CBS News has learned of another case in which a CIA officer who used his home computer for classified work seems to have been treated more severely than Deutsch. A senior CIA officer was found to have typed one classified document into his home computer. After an 8-month investigation, the officer was demoted to a lower pay grade. The investigation of Deutsch, who had 42 classified documents on his computer and parts of 32 others, dragged on for more than 2 years before Tenet finally suspended Deutsch's security clearances, which he had kept after leaving as CIA director.
In fact, the original CIA investigation recommended only that Deutsch be counseled, and it might have ended there had not a whistleblower in the director's office complained that Deutsch was getting off too easy. Dan?
David Martin. Austria is on a collision course with Europe and the United States. A new Austrian government was formed today, including a radical right-wing anti-immigration party led by a man who once praised Hitler. Today, he signed a paper condemning Austria's Nazi past. But the European Union says it will go ahead with political sanctions against Austria when the new government is sworn in tomorrow. Two of President Clinton's major peace initiatives are on the rocks tonight. In the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak ended his summit with Yasser Arafat with no agreement and no chance to meet a February 13th deadline for a framework peace deal. On Northern Ireland, Britain says it will move shortly to resume direct rule over the province because of the total lack of progress toward disarmament by the Irish Republican Army. Up next on CBS, Eye on America, an investigation into a food industry scheme that could be costing you money. It is said the 3 keys to success in real estate are location, location, and location. Turns out it's the same in the food business, and some food makers are paying for prime real estate in the supermarket. This controversial practice is the subject of investigations by the government and CBS's Eye on America, reported by Wyatt Andrews.
It's no accident that some foods like Doritos are placed at eye level in the supermarket or sold at the end of an aisle. Frito-Lay, the manufacturer, pays the supermarket money for this slot, a slotting fee. And while it's legal, the question now is, should it be?
This is a payment which is usually under the table, unseen, unheard.
Senator Kit Bond of Missouri sees slotting fees as the payola of the 21st century, a pay-to-play system that is now used not just in groceries, but in bookstores, in music stores, and on the internet. Bond says, legal or not, slotting limits competition.
Basically what they're doing is knocking their little competitors off the market.
Federal investigators are taking a fresh look at the explosion of these fees, and one reason is this.
And eventually force them out of business.
When Bond held a hearing on slotting fees, 2 witnesses hid behind a screen, fearing retaliation just for discussing the practice. This man is a California food maker who asked us to protect his identity. He kept records of what it took to get his products into supermarkets, and sometimes what it took was a bribe.
When I win, the particular buyer in that particular case asked for $10,000 personally and wanted between $100,000 and $200,000 for his stores.
Even the legal slotting fees, he says, hurt the small guy. When larger competitors offer more in slotting fees than his company can afford, his products are out.
Why does the consumer lose in this?
Because there's no competition at the store level. We as consumers are being denied the opportunity of free choice, and manufacturers are being denied the opportunity to succeed.
Some of the nation's biggest food chains would not discuss slotting fees on camera, but they argue the fees are actually good for small manufacturers, that this system is what gives small businesses access to an intensely competitive market. And this industry lobbyist says stores don't always pocket the fees as profit. They use the fees to give discounts.
Are these fees good for the consumer?
Oh, yes, they are absolutely good for the consumer.
Tell me how.
Anything that comes to the grocer gets passed along to consumers.
But others, like Professor Mary Ann Jennings, say slotting and placement fees add billions to the cost of goods.
Name one time in history when the consumers have said, gee, I'm really glad that behind my back you engaged in these under-the-table payments. Look what you've done for me. To say that consumers benefit because you've tacked on a charge is nuts.
My question is, do you think this is good old-fashioned grease?
I believe it is, yes. I really don't see much difference between this and the old payola.
And that is what the U.S. Senate and Federal Trade Commission are asking. If payola on the radio has been illegal since the 50s, why is pay-to-play legal in retail stores today? In Washington, Wyatt Andrews for Eye on America.
On the CBS Market Watch, the Senate today confirmed President Clinton's nomination of Republican Alan Greenspan to a fourth term as chairman of the Federal Reserve. On Wall Street, the Dow closed up 10 points. A rally in tech stocks drove the NASDAQ to a 137-point gain.
For the latest medical news and information, visit our health website, cbshealthwatch.com.
Anyone will tell you to reach the top of your profession, you first have to learn the ropes. The man you're about to meet spent years doing exactly that, working to achieve his American dream. And now, as you will see, he is riding high.
I think every kid, as a kid growing up, dreams of being a cowboy. Yeah! Yeah! I decided probably by the time I was 11 or 12 years old that I wanted to rodeo and be a calf roper.
Fred Whitfield.
Now Fred Whitfield ropes calves for a living, and in record time.
And everything is good.
After 20 years of roping and rodeo, today's competition in Fort Worth, Texas is just another day at the office for this cowboy.
You're about to welcome the all-around champion cowboy.
I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that like to see Fred Whitfield crash, but that's not going to happen.
Whitfield is no run-of-the-mill rodeo hand. He is at the top of his sport.
What you gonna do, rope? Ride bulls. I can be walking through the mall, or I can be here at a rodeo, or I can be sitting in a restaurant, and I'll see 4- and 5-year-old kids, you know, on up, say, Mom, that's Fred Whitfield, that's Fred Whitfield. And I mean, that makes me feel good.
Who is the #1 all-around cowboy in the world?
He's just won professional rodeo's top prize. Fred Whitfield is the all-around world champion cowboy.
If you can win at this level, I mean, you're the best in the world, and that's one of the dreams that I've always had.
Whitfield also holds the bragging rights to being the only African-American to ever win the all-around world title.
Look out, Las Vegas!
While he admits it originally took some time for him to gain acceptance in this sport, Whitfield is now the envy of all the cowboys.
I think a lot of people in professional rodeo doesn't really see, you know, skin color. I think they prefer to say, you know, here comes Fred Whitfield. Gosh, that guy ropes good.
He may have had a bad day at the office today.
Fred Whitfield is in trouble.
But this cowboy and his dream will ride on.
What he has done is what we're proud of. Let's give him a hand for that. It didn't work this afternoon. But you can say...
Fred Whitfield hopes to win another world championship and to achieve another dream, to marry and start a family.
The American Dream, brought to you by Fidelity Investments. We help you invest responsibly.
CBS today joined the other broadcast television networks in pledging to work to increase diversity in the industry, both on screen and behind the scenes. CBS Television President Les Moonves signed a memorandum of understanding with a coalition of civil rights groups, including the NAACP, which had been threatening a TV boycott. Television has been accused of blurring the line between sports and entertainment. But would you believe this? A made-for-TV football league sponsored by the World Wrestling Federation. They're calling it the XFL, Wrestling officials say the X stands for exciting and extreme, whatever that means. But unlike the wrestling shows, the WWF says its football games will not be fixed. The opening bell for the XFL is set for February 2001. Part of our world tonight. I'll be back later with a 48 Hours mystery. Bill Legatuda has a preview.
Two people living their California dream.
I had it all.
Then came infidelity. Jeannie was the other woman.
Mindy repeatedly threatened Jeannie Adair.
Did divorce lead to murder? A 48 Hours mystery tonight.
48 Hours tonight at 10, 9 Central Time here on the CBS Television Network. For the latest CBS news, including our top political coverage, get to the internet, click on CBS.com. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. See you again soon on 48 Hours.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
A young cop following in his dad's footsteps was shot dead by fellow officers. Now his father's trapped between black and blue. Tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
How to blow away the winter blues tomorrow on The Early Show. Experience CBS News.